Hey Studio Fit, I hope everybody's doing well today. In this edition of our sleep series, I want to talk about what's more of probably a subtopic of just caffeine. So the first thing we want to know about caffeine is that it blocks the reception of adenosine until ... Those little ominous dots afterwards. So the cool trick that caffeine plays in the body, and this has to do with adenosine, and we talked about adenosine in a couple of videos before this. It's basically just that chemical that promotes sleep pressure. So gradually, as you go throughout the day, your body is accumulating more and more adenosine, and it promotes grogginess. So basically, it makes it to where your brain does not perceive the environmental stimulus as much, and you slowly get less and less, and it gives you that groggy sensation that makes you want to sleep. So the trick that caffeine plays is that the receptor cells that would normally take in adenosine as it builds up throughout the day get blocked. Basically, there's a caffeine barrier that forms in front of the adenosine and keeps it from giving you those groggy side effects. So this happens, but as it begins to wear off, as your body begins to break down that caffeine barrier, the adenosine actually does get there, and eventually it promotes the grogginess like it normally would have. And usually this is one of the reasons that you will feel that intense grogginess. If you've ever had that time where you stayed up really, really late and you kept having caffeine, and then all of a sudden you feel like you just hit a wall. That's the reason, because that adenosine is still building up on the outside. So caffeine makes a barrier, but you're still having adenosine build up as you move and you go throughout your day. So when that barrier finally does break down, you still get this crash of adenosine into the brain and lack of stimulus, which promotes the grogginess. Half-life of coffee is about 5 hours. Of course, this is based on genetics, but usually most people, a big section of the population, 5 hours is pretty spot on. And what does this mean when it says half-life? So let's give an example for this. I feel like that's best to illustrate it. If I consumed 100 milligrams of coffee, say about a cup of coffee, in 5 hours, I would still have 50 milligrams in my body. Another 5 hours from that, so 10 hours total, I would have 25 milligrams in my body. So the reason I like to mention this is it kind of allows you to plan your day, especially if you are more sensitive to coffee, or caffeine in particular. If I'm having a cup of coffee, 100 milligrams at 12 o'clock, and if I'm trying to go to bed around 10 o'clock, I'm still going to have about 25 milligrams, because it's been 2 5-hour periods, so I've halved it twice, gone from 100 to 50 to 25. So I still have about 25 milligrams when I'm trying to go to sleep. So it's just something to consider. The peak effect of coffee comes approximately 30 minutes after consumption. And this is obviously just caffeine in general. Coffee is just the big example. So when you consume coffee, if you're doing it for the purpose of it being a stimulant and you're trying to reap the benefits of that extra focus and attention that you get, consuming it 30 minutes before your peak productivity time is the best use of it. 1 cup of decaf still contains about 15 to 30% the normal amount of caffeine. So 2 reasons I always like to mention this. The first one being, if you are trying to switch off of coffee or caffeine completely and you switch to decaf, it is still going to have some caffeine in it. So having it late at night, so if I've gone out through the whole day and I'm drinking coffee and then late at night I feel like I just crave the coffee, if I have decaf, it's still going to have some of the side effects of ingesting more caffeine. The second thing I like to mention about decaf is it is still a really good way of, if you're trying to get off of caffeine permanently, or if you're trying to lower your caffeine consumption permanently, say you're having a hard time sleeping at night and you think that might be one of the root causes, I always recommend to have the same volume of coffee, the same amount of cups of coffee at the same times of the day. Just switch to decaf, or switch to half and half first. So switch to half of it's a full loaded coffee and half of it's decaf, and then slowly switch to just full decaf. It slowly lowers that percentage down, and you're still, the body and it's the way it forms habits and cravings and things like that. Times of the day, your environment, what you're doing, they're going to make you crave that cup of coffee. So if you fill that void by actually still drinking something that to you seems almost identical, you're going to easily transition out of that habit. So you're basically deloading your body from caffeine, but to you it seems very much the same. A lot of your environment is the same. Caffeine before bed can reduce your deep sleep by 20%. So this would be for those people who are not as sensitive to caffeine. They say, okay, well, I can have it right before I go to bed and that doesn't affect my sleep. Well, just because you get to sleep does not mean that it didn't affect the quality of sleep. And in particular, studies show that deep sleep is the most affected, so that memory storage and a few other things gets kind of impaired when you have a stimulant right before bed. Even if you don't seem to have any of the obvious side effects of keeping you up, it's still going to have some effect in the background. So that's it for caffeine. The next topic we're going to discuss is alcohol consumption.